All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. Jerry, thank you for being here. Damien, thank you. Jennifer, thank you for being here. Everyone, happy Wednesday, good afternoon, and welcome to today's PlugIN Labs webinar session. It's going to be a very exciting one. I've had the pleasure of seeing Rajiv pitch in the past, and he does a really, really awesome job. Today, we have the startup hype man himself, Rajiv Nathan. He's the founder of Startup Hype Man, and he has extensive experience as it relates to helping founders hone their pitch and successfully fundraise. Today, we're going to be asking him a couple of questions so we can glean some of the insights that he's taken from his time advising founders. And then we're going to open up the floor for Q&A for you all to ask him questions about your respective situations. So without further ado,
I'm already ready for Jerry to ask me a question that I won't know the answer to because it'll be so specific to med tech and whatever.
Jerry's got that look. Please, we should remember it, man. We're looking forward to it.
Just be lucky I don't call you homie.
I love it. Well, Rajiv, man, you're home. Please, without further ado, man, the floor is yours. Let's kick things off by just getting some more context surrounding your background and why you decided to launch Startup Hype Man.
Yeah, so essentially, you remember that Chris Tucker, Jackie Chan movie Rush Hour from the late 90s? There was that scene where Chris Tucker's like, "Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?" Iconic scene. That really is what is the lived reality for a startup founder on a day-to-day basis. Like, you have to pitch what you're doing, but so often what ends up happening is whatever's in your head is not coming out in a clear way through your mouth. And then people go, huh, what is it again? Or they're like, oh, I get it. It's another, insert generic comparison here. And you don't want to be in either of those camps. Really, I think when the stakes are this high, whether it's raising capital or getting your X number of customers, you don't want to be looked at, and you can't afford to be looked at as another one. You want to be the only one. So my job and my team's job as Startup Hype Man, as I like to say, is we help you not just go to market, but become the GOAT to market. And we do that specifically through figuring out the right pitch and message and story that will help you stand out and stand apart. So the audience, whether it's an audience of investors or customers, recognize you not as the best, but as the only. And that's a really key distinction, because if you can get them looking at you in that way, the situation you want to find yourself in. I got started in this by accident about 8 years ago. So back in 2016, I had a different business I was doing for a couple of years that was more around personal brand development. And our audience for that, we worked with some entrepreneurs, but primarily we were working with job seekers and people on the career market who really struggled to talk about themselves, mainly in a job interview. Most job interviews start with the question, tell me about yourself. And most people have a terrible response to that. They just recite what's on their resume. And we had figured out a pretty unique and innovative way to respond to that with a 3-sentence pitch that tells someone who you are, why you're here, and why you should be having a conversation in this moment, whether it was in an interview or whether it was in a networking situation or the other, common scenarios where people say, what do you do? Or tell me about yourself. We had built a lot of really good sort of marketing and branding strategies for an individual, for their personal brand, that being the center point of it. We could just never figure out a business model that worked. So after about 2 years, we had to shut it down. Very serendipitously, as we were closing it, I got a phone call from the head of an incubator based out of Chicago called Bunker Labs. I had met him through networking, and he called me up. Bunker Labs is an incubator specifically for military veteran entrepreneurs and military veteran active duty and their spouses. And now, to clarify, I have no military experience, but we had met, and he was like, hey, I know you do the pitch stuff for individuals and job seekers. Do you think you could do it for businesses as well? Because we have this new cohort coming in, and they all did really bad on their last demo day, the last cohort, and they're going to need pitch help. And I was like, oh yeah, totally. I got you covered. Now, the truth of the matter is I said yes like that. And then I hung up the phone and I frantically started Google searching, what is a startup pitch? I was not at all involved in this world. I did, aside from watching Shark Tank, I really didn't know how it worked. I was completely unaware of the term TAM. And it was just new to me, but coming off of a company not making money for a couple of years, you get an opportunity to do a little consulting gig. Why not say yes? You know, what did Biggie say? Squeeze first, ask questions last. Why not do that? I was a very quick study. I had enough of a storytelling background. I just needed to know like what was the arena we were playing in. And once I started to learn what those kind of perimeter lines were, I've learned the basics, the foundational stuff. I learned the rules, and then over time started to learn how can you break the rules, quote unquote, or take the rules and go above and beyond to really make your stuff stand out. And that, you know, that accelerator was like my initial stomping ground to just learn the ropes. And even in just learning the ropes, the people who were working with me were getting really, really good results. They were raising capital, they were getting customers. And then so through that, it accidentally incubated Startup Hypeman. I didn't go in being like, this is what I'm going to do next. But I came out being like, I think this is what I should do next, because I was having so much fun too. And that was the accidental birth of Startup Hypeman.
Well, really appreciate the background, Rajiv. I'm sure in your time, not just working with Becker Labs, but to date, you know, you've worked with a lot of different companies, and you've seen the best of the best. And I'm sure some test cases here or there. That kind of brings us to our next question. I'm curious to understand, what are some non-obvious mistakes that founders make with regard to pitching to investors?
Yeah, good question. So, you know, I think, and let's clarify obvious versus non-obvious. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people say things like, you know, like, let them know what your TAM is. If you didn't know that, if you didn't do that, that's an obvious mistake, right? Someone will tell you like, highlight the problem. If you don't do that, that's an obvious mistake. So when we talk about non-obvious, it's kind of as the name says, but it's the things that aren't often talked about as much, that I think perhaps this have the same or even bigger impact if you get it wrong. So one of those things I would say is, let's actually talk about the TAM for a moment. It is easy to Google search what is the market size of blank, right? What is the market size of ed tech, right? Ed tech solutions. That can work, but understand most VCs, and Angel might not do this, but most institutional VCs are really going to dig behind that number that you put out there. I was interviewing a VC panel last week for an event that I hosted here in Chicago. And one of the questions that I threw out to them was just around like the overall funding trends of recently. Like Crunchbase had just put out a report the day before that said, you know, seed funding was exactly even first half of this year as compared to the second half of last year. And both of those numbers were slightly below or higher, I don't remember, than first half of last year. So, you know, I'm interviewing them on this panel, and the night before I sent them, I was like, hey panel, like, here's an idea of the questions I'm going to ask. And that thing about the Crunchbase report was in there. So then when I asked the question live, one of these three panelists literally had like a worksheet they had pulled out where they were like reverse mathing what that number actually meant. And then the other one, without having any worksheet in front of him, started also talking about like what's actually behind that number. And then I paused and I was like, okay, I need everyone in this room right now to realize, I was like, this is a Crunchbase article. I didn't even link to it when I sent them these questions beforehand. That means in the last 12 hours, they went out of their way to find the article and then research what was the big number and what are all the little numbers behind it that aren't being factored in that actually make the real argument. And this was just for a free panel that they're doing. So that's the level of like detail that those kinds of big numbers can get scrutinized down to. So you want to have, you know, your market size numbers really dialed in so that they're defensible, right? If someone asks like, how did you calculate that, or where did you get that from? It should ideally be more than, oh, I don't know, a friend Googled it, right? Because that's the stuff that's going to determine if you have a viable venture backable business. You might have a great product, but then if they're like, in actuality, the market size is way smaller than you're projecting it to be, that's going to hurt your chances. I'll come back to the TAM stuff a little bit later, because I also want to touch on at some point this concept that I call the TAM trap, but I'll come back to that later. Another thing that I frequently see is, as it pertains to pitching the problem, is leading with numbers. A really effective problem statement should be emotional. And then after you have built up emotion and established that, then you can reinforce the claim with numbers. But by and large, earlier this year, I was at a global startup conference, and there was like, I don't know, 100 something startups that were like had exhibit tables at it. And when you walk up to each one of them and you're like, hey, tell me about your company, more than half of them say something like, let me tell you, such and such is a $25 billion market. Which, great, everyone has a big market size. But that's not like the fact that you have a market is not your problem. The problem is an individual person's problem, like down to an individual level, a one-to-one level.
Right.
Versus talking about like, X percent of people have this thing going on, or around the globe, there are $80 billion lost every year in productivity for whatever. Numbers in and of themselves do not carry emotion. They will carry emotion when they have context. So instead of opening with numbers, use numbers as a reinforcing statistic. Numbers, ROI, et cetera. Those are supporting and closing arguments, but they're not opening arguments. So don't make the mistake of just throwing out big numbers right away. I think another thing too that comes up a lot is leading with the solution. So this might be more on the obvious side, but I still think not enough people, even if they know it exists, they still do it wrong. It's very easy to say, we're a company that does X, Y, Z. And while that may be factually accurate, you are reducing your chance of that being a really valuable interaction by just writing off, more so to speak, your company as we're an XYZ, or we're a product that does this and this, or whatever. What you want, and this is something, if for the PlugIN community, if you were on the workshop we did back in June, I think it was, I shared the KPASA formula, which is our signature elevator pitch formula: problem, approach, solution, action. Ryan, when you asked me what does my company do at the very beginning, I delivered it to you through the lens of KPASA. Right? I talked about the rush hour problem,
right,
and why that's an issue. And then I used that as the entry point into what we do. I could have said, we're a company that helps startups with their pitches, which is, again, it's not factually inaccurate, but you get more out of me giving you the context, right? And you will gain someone's attention, and you will get them really following along with you the more compelling you are in that KPASA model. And the more you say about the problem, the less you have to say about what your solution is, because the solution will start to answer itself through how well you can articulate a problem.
Quick question on that point. Whether it be founders within our community or outside, everyone has a lot of anxiety with regard to how much time they're spending in these elevator pitches, right? And being able to trim the fat is really key in getting your message across. When people are looking to model, their pitch after the KPASA model, forgive me if I mispronounced, what recommendations do you have with regard to like trimming the fat and making sure you're still getting straight to the point? Because sometimes it can be hard to make that pitch.
Yeah. So in the KPASA elevator pitch formula, through that model, it's designed to be able to tell a 1-minute story, which you can absolutely do when you have a chance to introduce yourself. Now, you'll hear a lot of experts be like, well, no, it shouldn't be more than 10 seconds. And it's like, yeah, if it's bad, it shouldn't be more than 10 seconds, because why would someone want to keep listening? If it's good, people will keep listening. And what you want to do is, so when we talk about trimming the fat on that, there are likely many different problems that your market has, and it's easy to talk about all of them. You want to identify what is like the uniting lead problem that the rest of the things are like a trickle down symptom of, or an effect of, and dial it into that one problem. And then again, don't get so bogged down in and being like, and here's the problem for one person. But now, did you know that in just the US alone, it's this much, and then 75% of people in the UK are doing this, right? Like, just keep it on a one person talk track. People will ask you follow-up questions. You'll have a chance to talk about it more. But like, the more you try and impress people with the numbers up front, the more it actually has a backfire effect, right? Because it just looks like you're trying to, like, you're insecure and you're trying to impress someone. It's kind of like that person who you meet who in like the first 2 minutes of meeting them, they tell you like every famous person they know, you know, because they're like, they want to impress you with it. And you're just like, my God, you must have self-confidence issues. Right. So you, like, let it be like a progressive sort of like almost discovery of information. So that problem statement in the K-PASA model, when we build them, our target is that it's roughly 24 seconds is the problem. And then you get into the rest of it. And again, that might sound like a long time, but if what you're saying is interesting and you've constructed your sentences in the right way, it is this like, you're continuing to draw people in with every sentence that you speak.
Well said. Any other points with regard to some overlooked issues that founders may encounter with developing their pitch?
Yeah, I think so this is probably more a word for the extroverts in the room and who watch this on the recording. Don't wing what you want to say. And I would also argue, don't even just put like bullet points in your speaker notes. Know what you want to say word for word. If especially, and I'm talking like particularly here, if you're gonna like have like a 3-minute, 5-minute, whatever pitch, like in a demo day competition, etc. You don't have to stick to that thing word for word, but the fact that you have gone through the exercise of writing it out will give you so much more clarity in what you should say and should not say. And it will help you in the moment when you maybe forget what to say, or I guess you're less likely to forget what you want to say if you've gone through the process of writing out the whole thing. Like that transcription process does so much for your memory and so much for like you feeling what you're like, feeling the pitch that you're actually going to give. And I say extroverts because extroverts who like and enjoy speaking tend to be like, I'm good at speaking. I don't need to work on, right? I don't need to put much thought or practice into this. And then they like that confidence is their, wings of Icarus flying too close to the sun. Introverts who are freaked out by getting in front of a room of people will over prepare, and they will write everything down they want to say, and then they'll end up doing a really good job. So don't get that like false sense of confidence that just because you're good at speaking, you don't need to have gone through the exercise of writing out what you want to say and practicing. The biggest thing, aside from like it being a helpful exercise, this is going to catch potential redundancies that you will likely say if you're winging it. Like, it's really easy to make the point on slide 3 and then make that exact same point again on slide 6 if you are just going the more like winging it method.
Well said, Rajiv. I think, you've talked about the TAM piece. You talked about, being able to, effectively communicate, what you're doing in a very quick and succinct way. I've heard you speak a little bit about the funding triangle, in previous discussions. Can you touch on that piece and how founders can apply that to their pitch deck?
Yeah. So this is a model we kind of created over I would say like early part of last year, and then started to really crystallize in the middle of last year. So, and this is the approach we take to pitch deck development. And I think it's broadly applicable. When you consider a fundraising pitch, it should accomplish this thing that we call the funding triangle. So if you picture a triangle, or if you draw a triangle, the top of the triangle is your product strategy and vision. Sorry, product, strategy, and vision. The bottom right of the triangle is your founder or founding story. And the bottom left of the triangle is market trends. Most pitches just hit on one or two. I'd say probably hit on two of the three. The really, really strong and effective pitches are able to execute all three. And it's not a given, it's an equilateral triangle. So for example, if you were to, if depending on the stage of company that you're in, depending on the type of company you have, depending on the industry, you might need to over-index in one corner versus another. And so that's going to change. Like you want to find that right mix. Now, what I've kind of boiled it down to is that the less traction you have, the more you lean on market trends. So the more you lean in the bottom left corner. The more traction you have, the more you go to the top of the triangle. So I'd say less traction, bottom left, bottom right, more traction, top. So you can kind of use that as a model as you figure out what your pitch should be based on the stage you're at right now. But essentially, it doesn't mean erase one of the corners if you have more or less traction. It means you're going to favor one of the other corners more. So when you put this all together, basically, you then develop a pitch that is not just pitching people, it's actually teaching them. And pitches that teach generate this effect where the person who's taking it in is either going to say out loud or just to themselves, I never thought of it like that before. That's really interesting. Ryan, if you're the founder, that's really interesting, Ryan. He's onto something here. We need to keep talking to Ryan and his team because they seem to get it. Essentially, you showcase that it changes perception because you have now revealed a corner of the earth that was right underneath their nose this whole time, and they never thought to look there. Like you've given them the glasses now to look at it. And now that they have this lens, they can't unsee it. And so you being that illuminator of a new truth or new information now puts you in that status of being a thought leader in the space. And rather than being looked at as a person building a product that may or may not work, now you get looked at as a person who has generated so much experience and insight in this specific category. And based off of that insight is now developing a product that we feel good about.
No, it makes complete sense. I can say from the VC perspective, you want to invest in someone that's an expert, right? If you're lukewarm or give any type of indication that you're not cream of the crop with regard to your field, why would I feel comfortable putting money behind you, right? So
yeah,
I think that triangle is really helpful. That kind of leads me to another question. So you talked about if you have more traction, you lean a little bit more towards the top. And with regard to traction, a lot of founders get tripped up when trying to describe their go-to-market strategy. It's a real tough area to master. How do you recommend founders approach communicating what their go-to-market is going to be? Because people might just say social media or a newsletter or XYZ. How can you make sure that drives home to investors?
Yeah. So real quick, just for the purposes of the recording, Jerry, do you mind if we just kill your video? Yeah. Thank you. So let's talk. So go-to-market strategy. If you are an earlier stage company, like just starting to get into market, or you haven't even gone into market yet in any capacity, what you want to talk more about is how you plan to get your first 5 to 10 customers, or your first X number of users if it's more of an app that you're developing, like a consumer app. It's going to go a long way if you can tell someone not just we project 200K revenue by the end of next year or the end of this year, but if you can also say, and here's how we're going to do it. And otherwise, it's just kind of like smoke and mirrors. And a lot of people think, well, once I get an investment of 500K, then I'll know what to do. I'm telling you right now, having that check in hand or not having that check in hand does not change your competence level regarding how you're going to market and sell and promote. So the earlier you are in the journey, the more you want to be able to highlight your actual plan to get customers. And this even better if you can say, we have like this many qualified in our pipeline right now. This many are in an advanced stage, and we've already got letters of intent from these two. Even better if you can do that. You want to show that like they're not just putting money into air, right? Like, and it really is air until you start getting customers or users. So be able to talk specifically through like what that funnel looks like today, which also goes to say like just saying, oh, social media, right? Like, okay, well, what about social media? Oh, we're going to use social to get our first 1,000 users. How? Do you know your ad copy? Do you have a helpful, do you have like a serious background in making organic work? Like what about social is going to work in your case? Because it doesn't work for most people. Why is it going to work for you? So get down to the specifics. The more the more traction you have, the more you want to talk about where the scale comes into play. This would be things like network effects. This would be like, what's the larger scale strategy? And it kind of boils down to like either network effects, like traditional like sales, partner-led growth, product-led growth, community-led growth, et cetera, et cetera. What's great is if in a pitch, if you can touch on it and then basically say, and I'm happy to walk you through our full marketing and sales strategy in a follow-up meeting. Because now you've actually dropped a little like a token or like a nugget, if you will, for them to pick up, a breadcrumb for them to pick up to have a second meeting with you. But you're not going to say everything up front, but you don't want to say so little that it looks like you don't actually have a plan in place. So give an idea of the plan, show what you're doing, and then offer up that you're happy to share more and like share the full plan and details in a follow-up meeting. I also want to just touch on real quick here, like really take a moment to think through like if it's really easy to pluck a strategy out of like this, the ether that's out there and be like, that's what we're going to do. But I really want to know if you know how you're going to execute that and what it means. So like, for example, podcasting is often a strategy. There's kind of two ways I see this. One is we're going to sponsor podcasts, which like, have you looked into what the ad budgets are for sponsoring a podcast? Do you have like 100K to test out several shows and then double down on the one that's working well? Do you know that like think through how humans behave and act, right? Like how many podcasts have you listened to that have had sponsors, and how many times have you acted on that sponsorship? Right. Or how often do you hit the fast forward button when you know the sponsorship's coming up? So understand, like, just because it's your company, people don't automatically start acting special for you. They act just as they would if it was anyone else's company. So think through that. Another one I see that can work, but you have to like know the mechanics of it is, well, we're going to host a podcast and invite our target audience on as guests, and then use that as an entry point into our sales funnel. I think that can work, and it can be a really smart play, but also have an idea beforehand how you're going to take someone from guest to lead. Because it's not always as simple as, hey, now that you were on our show, can we give you a demo of our product? Right. So think through how that funnel is going to look. Partnerships is another one I see that people get wrong a lot, and they don't know what partnership means. So I think an example of this would be like someone I was working with a few years ago. Their go-to-market was going to be to establish partnerships with like the professional membership organizations that are in their field. And I was like, great, I love that. What does a partnership look like? And they were like, They looked at me and then they started describing what their product does. And I was like, no, I understand what your product does. Tell me what a partnership looks like. And then they started describing the product. Well, we're going to get them to use our product. And I was like, no, that's not how this works. Very rarely will a professional membership organization just start promoting your product to their member base just because it's cool and because you asked them to.
Right.
So think through, what's your partnership strategy? How are you going to actually provide value to them beyond just the fact that you have a product? Because chances are, if it's just a product, they're going to ask you to pay them, right? They want you to pay to get access to their community. So there's a lot of scrappy things you can do, but what I'll tell you, what I have found to work best historically for my company, and when we talk to other companies about this, it works with them as well, is look at partnership through the lens of what kind of content can you offer their community. Every group, every brand on earth is starved for good content. So can you provide them with some kind of content that creates a step one into your funnel? Content could be, an ebook on the top 5 whatevers. It could be, a video series you've created, and you're not asking really for anything in return other than like a plan that they distribute it. And maybe, depending on what you offer, you have a way to capture email addresses, or contact info. Webinars usually work best to capture that. So that's another one too. Lead magnet, passive content of some kind, or offer to run a webinar to their community, where you can teach the audience something. And the webinar has got to be something that is valuable beyond the fact that you want to sell them a product. If you put on a webinar that is your demo, right, or it's your pitch deck for your fundraising, everyone's going to leave in the first 5-10 minutes. It has to be something you can teach their audience, and then use that as a way to then be like, and if you want to get started on this, we've got, the platform to make it happen. And here's an offer for you as a thank you for the webinar, right? Something like that. In fact, I should note, we're piloting this as a service right now, with a couple companies, like strategizing a webinar for you. So if anyone is listening to this and is curious if you think webinars could work for you, generally speaking, it works better for B2B. It can work for B2C, but for B2B, it works better. So if that's where you're at, reach out and we'll see if it'll work for you.
Absolutely. Rajiv, thank you so much. And if you all are interested in leveraging that service, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to put you in connection with Rajiv and his team. But I think now is a good time to open up the floor. If anyone has any specific questions as it relates to improving your pitch or different things that you've seen in the space. So feel free to come off mute or throw your question in the chat if you have anything.
This is the Ask Me Anything part of the Ask Me Anything. And it can be about pitching. It can be about strategy. It can be about, if you want to talk about sales strategy too, you can go there. So
I got a question.
Got a question? Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
I'm Brandon Bailey, founder of Tutor D. We're an edtech company. And we recently really reevaluated our target audience, our target customer, or ideal customer persona, whatever you want to call it. And we found that, we were looking to sell to edtech schools and stuff. Like the edtech sales cycle is very challenging. But furthermore, was it didn't really fit with genuinely what we were trying to do. And we found ourselves we use our own products in our own teaching spaces. So I teach web development and software engineering skill sets. Mm-hmm. And we use our Tutor D platform for that. What I kind of discovered was we actually are more angled towards entrepreneurs and maybe someone who's running trainings or people who train people up and need a tool to help drive that training and engagement, get that measurement information back. So we've looked at one of our customers actually told us about a company called Teachable. I go to their website. It's exactly like the customer, the space that we're looking for. So we're kind of shifting our target audience of who we're looking for to fit kind of like the same space as Teachable, LMS. But my question is like, how do you even, when I was trying to like reverse engineer like who their ideal customer persona and like what their target audience is and the TAM, SAM, and SOM, it's like it's almost B2C, like their business, I guess, almost, because it can fit anyone. But like, how do you, I guess, size up a market, or like if you were looking at Teachable's market, how would you go about the TAM, SAM, and SOM?
It's a good question. I don't know the inner workings of Teachable, so I can't say for certain like how you do it for them. What I will give, by the way, the fact that you asked that on voice but not video made it feel like this was like a radio show and you called into it.
Nice.
So what I'm going to do here, just give me a second. I am going to pull up on my side a couple articles here for how you can calculate that stuff that I've found over the years. There's basically a couple different formulas you can go by to be able to figure out that information, which, factor in looking at either, are you going to look at like TAM from the lens of like the technology spend in that field versus are you going to look at TAM through the lens of total like revenue generated in that field, and then how to actually like create a calculation off of that like lead number. I'll pull that up on my side, and I'll throw the link in the chat here in a second.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Extra note though, on like market size is if it's really hard to figure out the revenue numbers or the dollar numbers behind something, then I would fall back to volume of the market. And on top of that, market size is like one part of the equation, but then if we think about the funding triangle, like lean into your market trends. And this, I would say this is especially important if it's important regardless, but you can lean into it more if you're a little bit fuzzy on the market size. You want to have a stat or maybe a handful of stats that make someone's eyebrows go up when they hear it, or makes their eyebrows furl like in a good way, or they're like, there's a company we worked with a few years ago in the ed tech space, specifically through the lens of youth sports. And the stat that we found and put in their deck, it was like, TAM was like youth sports is a $17 billion industry, something like that. Okay. Like everyone can get along, can generally agree with that. But then it was like, but did you know 1 in 5 households spends more on their kids' sports than they do on their own mortgage? Everyone, look, Ryan's eyebrows literally just went up.
I tried to fight it. Now, interesting.
Right? Something like that makes someone do a double take. What else?
Any questions, whether it be market size, best practices for your pitch, feel free to ask.
Hi, Rajiv. I'm Jennifer Dowg here. I'm with Ionis Medical. We are a medical device company using cold plasma to treat ENT conditions. Our first condition that we're looking at is tonsillitis. So we are getting ready to do our friends and family raise. We are very early on. We have an MVP product. We're getting ready to do our first very small clinical trial to get some data. What advice, outside of this emotional connection, would you give to an early stage company in putting together a pitch deck?
Ask the question part of it again.
Yeah. What advice would you give to an early stage company that has, not a real concrete go-to-market plan, not concrete financials? What are some things that those early stage companies should look at to put into a pitch deck?
Okay. So, this is where I would lean more in the funding triangle on the market trends and your story as founder or founders. You will need to have some number, like some like market numbers in there. What I would say on the financials side of it, like for like your forecast, and this is a tip that I picked up from the team at Forecaster. They're one of our partners. They have a great software for financial modeling. It's forecaster.co. and their team is also very good at fundraising. And they said, whenever you talk through your numbers, your projections, your financial model, like basically open with some form of saying, now everything you're going to see is based off of a set of key assumptions that we have. And we are aware that these assumptions could be wrong. That said, here's how we've mapped it out. You're basically like kind of, I don't know, showing some transparency up front, and that goes a long way. With regards to your go-to-market, if you don't have one pinned down yet, then you'd want to talk through, here are the 2 or 3 that we are exploring to figure out which one's going to give us the most traction. I would also even, and if you don't feel like you have like the in-house expertise or you need help in that, this is something we've been adding more to the decks we've worked on over the last year or so, is on your, either as its own slide or on your ask slide, also put in there, like, what are the gaps that you are already aware of where you would need help from a partner? That's, again, it's another note of just being transparent, being like, look, we know a lot. We also know what we don't know. And here are the areas that we're not as proficient in. Here's what we're doing to make up for that lack of proficiency, but we could also use some help from the right strategic partner. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, great. By the way, in the background, I'm still trying to find that link. If I don't find it during the course of this call, Ryan, I'll send it to you to send out to everyone. Is that okay?
Awesome. Yeah, totally.
And I think Jerry's got his hand up.
Jerry, feel free to come off of mute. Oh, there you go.
Okay. We have a product that's for women. It doesn't apply to men because men don't deliver children. So we solve a consequence of childbirth called urinary incontinence. And we find that 95% of the investors are men. They've never experienced this problem. And so when we talk about it, it's like, it doesn't relate to me. I don't care about it. I don't invest in it. So how do we pitch men and get them to care about the women in their lives that have this problem?
2 ways. 1, start pitching women with it, specifically female investors. 2 is contextualize the problem through the lens of how the people in their life that they care about would experience it and how that would then affect them. So give me like the very, very high level overview of the product again.
A medical device that goes in the patient's urethra that blocks unwanted urine leaks and gives her the freedom to enjoy life without diapers or pads.
Okay. So essentially pitch that through the lens of how, like, perhaps how easy it is to go to the bathroom for a man, and then be like, now what if every time you had to deal with this, and this, that's what your wife, your mom, your daughter is experiencing. So if you can start to tie it to the people that they actually know and get them to picture those people, that helps them start to embrace the problem and that it actually exists. But also see what kind of female, led funds are out there as well, and maybe target those first.
Yeah, we pitched the female investors 3 groups of female angels across the country, and they are highly risk averse. So they will only invest after you've done all the work and after in the market and after you've gone through the FDA and after you raise funding. They won't give you any money to get there.
Well, I would say also before, and you may already be doing this, but this is just a general note for everyone. Take a look at the fund in advance, so you're not wasting your time pitching people who you don't meet their like minimum requirements yet. And again, Jerry, I'm not saying you have not done that. I'm just giving a general note to everyone. Like, for example, every fund defines early stage differently. And I know it's frustrating, but they all say like we invest early stage, or sometimes like we invest at the earliest stages. And then you keep reading the fine print on the site and it's like earliest stages means $1 million in revenue.
Right.
So just like make sure you're not wasting your time with the wrong companies up front, or even better, if you don't need to raise capital today, start building those relationships with those people. So that way, when you hit that point, you can be like, hey, by the way, we're here. Let's talk about getting you guys on board.
Thank you.
Yep.
Tom, please feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Ray, I have a question, a very, very simple question regarding simple topic, pitch decks. I would like to know from your perspective, what's your like benchmark? What's your average on like, how many people, how much time people are investing in a good pitch deck, how much money they're investing in a good pitch deck. Just from my side, right now it's about 40 hours and approximately $2,000 paid to different consultants, like gurus, market gurus. So that's my basically investment right now to have a perfect pitch deck. So what's your benchmark? Any kind of data you can provide?
I'm sorry. What the benchmark on what? Sorry.
On pitch deck, how much time people are investing in good pitch decks? How much money they spend on good pitch decks?
Oh, I see. I mean, I'm actually impressed if you got something done for 40 hours and $2,000, because that's like $20 an hour. Or yeah.
No, that's my time. That's my personal time investment.
Oh, your personal time. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. All right. Now
2000 paid
yeah.
To external consultants like you, charging for their time.
Yeah. I don't have a read on like how much time founders are spending on their own. Usually when we're working with them, maybe I should start asking about that. Hey, how much time did you spend on your own before this? But if you at least are curious about, the market that's out there, I have seen companies do everywhere from, $2,000 for 2 hours of consulting to 40, 50K for a comprehensive like creation of your pitch deck and your financial model and stuff like that. We have what I would call a very fair price point. Because we also don't just do a pitch deck. We have a complete pitch kit that we develop for you, inclusive of an elevator pitch, the story of your deck, the design, and a few other assets. And we price it based on a company's stage or like their traction. So the metric we look at is the total sum of previous capital, outside capital raised, plus revenue generated. And so that creates 3 pricing tiers. If that sum is over $1 million, you're in tier 1. The project's going to start at about 11,500. If you are in tier 2, that means that metric is between 500K and $1 million. This project will start at about 6,500. And if you are in tier 3, which is under 500K, it's going to start at about 5,400, I believe. And so through that process, we give you this full pitch kit of several assets.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a question you were asking for, but at least that's how I was able to answer it.
No, I know a little bit more now. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you want the link here that I'm putting,
I will contact you definitely.
That this has the write-up of our process.
Thank you.
Someone else here, Sharon. If you want to come off mute and ask your question, you can. I want to make sure I actually understand what it is you're asking.
It's pretty straightforward. If you've already got a product, and that product is in the market, but you're a bootstrapped startup, and you have an excellent proof of concept, you have an excellent product that's out there and people are using, but you realize that you do not have the expertise or the financial runway to do the kind of marketing that would need to be done. You need to either find a marketing partner or perhaps a partner who would be interested in licensing what you have, or even at some point looking at an exit.
So I understand the situation. What's the question within that? Sorry.
No, do you work with people who are in that situation?
Okay. Yeah, if the desire is to raise capital, yeah. If you're asking if we have a service that like finds marketing partners for you, no, we don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Or depending on the type of product you have. So we also do work on like sales narrative and stuff, but that's really more for a B2B SaaS that's at like the 2 million, 3 million revenue and up stage.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thanks, Raj.
Yeah. By the way, we met before, Sharon. Your name is so familiar.
Well, that's because I signed up when you first got started. I signed up for your monthly.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe that's why you're one of like the OGs
for a couple of years now. And,
okay.
And we probably have met. We were at 1871.
Okay.
And a couple other things too. So we've crossed paths.
Okay. All right. That's why. Cool. I guess, sorry, real quick note on, I mean, just the fact that you've been around with my stuff for a while. So you've been on my newsletter for a while. I would recommend to everyone here, like, get a newsletter going for your company. You should have an internal stakeholder one, like that goes out to potential future funders, advisors, et cetera, that is like progress updates on the company. I would recommend minimum quarterly, ideally monthly if you can. This is going to warm people up for when you are actually ready to raise. It makes it a lot easier to get a meeting. But then also have like an external facing newsletter meant for your customer or user base, and treat it as a way, like there are essentially, I ran a program earlier this summer. It was actually an accelerator like that we did in partnership with Active Campaign on getting people's newsletters launched. But I know a newsletter can be a daunting thing, but one of the models I want to break down for you real quick that we taught in the program was there are 3 levels basically of like a newsletter or of content creation. There is there's a creator, there is a curator, and there is, I'm trying to remember what the third name was, but basically like a reposter, if you will. So you can have if you're in the reposting thing, basically your newsletter is just providing resources to your subscribers that would be helpful to them. And that's nothing, it all has to be as like a list that you send out. If you are a curator, you're going to basically take some subset of resources, provide that to your audience, but add your commentary over the top of it. And your commentary can be like 1 to 2 paragraphs. That's how you start establishing your brand's voice. Creator is now you're putting original content in front of your audience. And for some people, creator makes sense. For some people, curator makes sense. For others, just being, again, I remember the name, but like the reposter version makes sense. But this is how you start to build a following around what you're doing and become a voice beyond just the product itself. Because the product's going to be the end of the funnel, right? Ultimately, for people. This is how you establish a voice so that way they want to ultimately then get introduced to the product. A lot of people who do a newsletter, all they do in the newsletter is just talk about updates to their product. And people are not signing up for that. They're signing up so they can be helped in some way. So figure out what way you want to provide value and then build a newsletter around that.
Well said, Raj. Well, everyone, we are at the hour mark. It's been great. Thank you all so much for attending today's session. Before we close out, Rajiv, is there anything that you want to share?
I threw my link in there for if you are interested in working with us. That gives you our sales page that talks through like what our process is. You can also book directly on my calendar to learn more through that page as well. I'm going to find that other market size article that I mentioned, and I'll send it to Ryan to distribute amongst you. I think I'll also get the list of whoever attended this as well, so I'll be able to follow up with you too. Every other Friday, speaking of curation and reposting, every other Friday in our newsletter, we post a list of upcoming funding opportunities that we have found on the internet, like across the country and across the world. So it's a really valuable resource, whether it's pitch competitions, grants, accelerators that are investing and have enrollment going on. We post those every other Friday through our newsletter. So those are resources to keep up. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is sending through momentarily. And keep at it, everyone. I mean, this is a tough game. It's a tough market to raise in right now, but it's only made tougher if you do not have a story that resonates with people. It's only made tougher if you're not taking it seriously. I'm not saying anyone here is not taking it seriously, but like, think about what the average person is doing and then be 2x, 3x better than that.
Absolutely. Well, really appreciate it, you all. Take care. Have a great day, and we will see you at the next session. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks all.